Turn the page to 34a. And the new Gemara is the new Mishnah is talking about the laws of Aravis, of the willows. And the laws of the willows, we'll see. It's interesting because the Pasuk mentions certain rules about the willow. The Pasuk says, Arve Nachal, has to be an Arava from a Nachal, which sounds like Arava from a stream. And yet, interestingly enough, the Gemara doesn't seem to take that as a requirement. At least, Gemara brings brises and things that don't seem to understand that, even though it says it in the pasuk, Arve Nachal. There's different brises in the Gemara. Of course, the first opinion says Arve Nachal means it grows on the Nachal, but then it gives another opinion that it just means that its leaf is like a Nachal, and another brisa says Arve Nachal implies maybe it only can be Arve Nachal, but because it says Arve, we include other things. So it is interesting that even though the pasuk itself does seem to say Arve Nachal, the Gemara finds ways of seeing hints that it could be acceptable even if it's not Aravis from the Nachal. And I say that because that it's interesting because from the previous Mishnayos and Gemara, we talked about the Pri Eitz Hadar, Kapis Tamarim. In those, we Pri Eitz Hadar, Kapis Tamarim, Anaf Eitz Avos. Anaf Eitz Avos, we understood means it has to be Avos. It has to be braided. It seems interesting that here, when it comes to the Arava, that it's the requirement is not as absolute as you would think if it's written so clearly in the pasuk. So the fact is that the Gemara does seem to have other ways of understanding the word Arve Nachal because of, or not just different ways of understanding Arve Nachal, but other hints in the pasuk that hints that it should be also kosher other ways. But I will tell you that it is a topic of discussion. The fact that Rashi brings down that it is a mitzvah to use aravos that grow by the stream. There is like a special mitzvah to use those. If you don't have it, it's kosher. But in the way Rashi learns that the first brisa, Tanu Rabbanon, the brisa that the Gemara starts off with, it's Arve Nachal. Rashi tells us that brisa says that it's the aravos that grow by a stream. Rashi says it's a mitzvah to use those, but the others are going to be kosher, like we'll see later, Arve. So in other words, Rashi learns that even the first opinion that seems to make it like it needs to be Arve Nachal, even he doesn't hold of that. Even that opinion doesn't mean that it has to be that way. It's not a definite requirement, because even Arve Nachal, the first opinion of the brisa, that the first statement the Gemara makes, Rashi on that says Hagadelam ala Nachal. No, it's a mitzvah. That's you get an extra mitzvah for that, but not that it has to be that way. He says, what's the proof? And he says, you see the brisa later, like that this opinion will still hold that it's going to be kosher if you don't have the Arve Nachal. So Rashi seems to say that it's better to have aravos that grow by a stream. Rashi says that mitzvah bezu, but miyushel baal is ksheira. The other opinions, the other Rishonim argue with Rashi, and they say no, it's no better to have from a stream or others. The pasuk's true. It's true. The pasuk does say a stream, but the fact is that the halacha is that any aravos are good. Why does it say a stream? So the Rush says, you know why it says a stream? Because it's a type. That's the type of aravos that we're talking about. They're called aravos of the street. Uh, Now they don't grow. You plant them other places, no problem. It's still aravos of a stream. That's what they are. They're aravos. That's the term, but not that that's where they have to grow. And so the Rush, according to the Rush, there's no difference between using the aravis that grow by a stream or aravis that grow in a regular field. Rashi seems to say that it's better to use these. Now, the pasuk says it because it's saying that the ideal way to do it is with those. The others will be kosher, but this is a mitzvah to use the arvei nachal. The Rush doesn't hold of that. The Rush says no. Any aravis that if it fits the bill, it's kosher. If it fits the rules, the criteria of what the aravis are. So this is an argument of the Rishonim, Rashi and the Rush. Now, so that's the discussion that we learned about on Friday. I did actually want to just mention on the previous Gemara. So we got very involved in the laws of Shabbos, and we were learning about the laws of Psik Reisha, Davar She'eino Meskaven. And I mentioned to you that there were the conclusion of the Gemara is a discussion among the Rishonim how the Gemara concludes, because the Gemara does not clearly say that it retracts from the previous statements. And the Gemara just adds on one point. And because the Gemara doesn't show that it retracts in this previous Gemara here, so there was a discussion in the Rishonim. So did the Gemara retract or not? Now, what am I referring to? I'm referring to the case where you're picking off berries from the hadassim. The hadassim grew berries, and they grew too many berries, more than the leaves. And so you want to pick them off on Yom Tov. And there was a brisa said you can't pick them off on Yom Tov, which fits with our Mishnah. Our Mishnah said the same thing. And then the other opinion in the brisa said, yeah, you're allowed to. Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon. Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon says you could take them off on Yom Tov. The Gemara asked, of course, how could you do such a thing? You're fixing a vessel. If you're making it fit to be used for the mitzvah. You're picking off these berries. So picking berries is not a problem on Yom Tov if it's detached from the ground. There shouldn't be any problem with picking berries. But because the hadas is usable for a mitzvah, you're now fixing a vessel. That's the problem with picking the berries. You're fixing it because now you're able to use it for the mitzvah. So the Gemara understands it to be that it should be a problem. It's like fixing a vessel. And the Gemara says, what's the answer to that problem? That he holds like Reb Shimon that Davar She'eino Meskaven. Again, this is the laws of Shabbos, very important laws of Shabbos. Davar She'eino Meskaven, something that you didn't have intention for. You didn't intentionally do it. You did intentionally. Your intent was picking berries, and your intent is not to make it a good hadas. The Gemara answered, he holds it. That's okay. You're picking berries if your intent is not to make it a kosher hadas. It's called a davar she'eino meskaven. According to Reb Shimon, that's mutter. That's permissible. Gemara says, yeah, Reb Shimon holds it's permissible, but only in cases where it's not automatic. It's not inevitable. Here, it's inevitable that it's going to be usable for a mitzvah. Now you inevitably fixed it. So this is called fixing. And even Reb Shimon agrees in this case that it should not be allowed. So how could you say that Rabbi Elazar follows the opinion of Reb Shimon and therefore he allows you to pick berries of the hadas on Yom Tov, which is naturally going to fix the hadas to be usable for the mitzvah, and you're going to say, well, I didn't have in mind because I'm eating them. I'm picking them to eat them. That's why I'm picking them. And so I don't have in mind it should be kosher. No, that doesn't work, because the fact that this inevitably is going to be usable for the mitzvah that makes it that it's considered as if you had that in mind. In other words, it's prohibited. It's a davar she'eina maskaven, but it's a psik ratio. It's automatic. You're automatically making it fit. You are fixing a vessel, and by you picking those to eat, you're also fixing a vessel, and it's also even according to Reb Shimon. Because Reb Shimon holds this thing about davar she'eina maskaven, you didn't have intention. That's if it's not automatically going to happen. It might happen. It might not happen. You're pulling a bench on the ground, and it makes a furrow on the ground. It might make a furrow, might not. Then I could say Reb Shimon says, you know what, you're allowed to pull a bench on the ground, no problem, because it might not. He allows that. Psik resha, but if it's automatically going to happen, it's called psik resha. It's for sure going to happen. It's inevitable. It's a very heavy bench. It's definitely going to make a furrow on the ground, which is a prohibition because it's like plowing on Shabbos. And therefore, if it's inevitable, then even Reb Shimon agrees you're not allowed to pull the bench. So the Gemara's answer here. So the Gemara asks this question: how are you gonna work that out? It's a davar she'eina, it's a psik resha. It's inevitable. It's gonna happen for sure. How are you gonna be? How do you hold? You're allowed to pick the berries. So the Gemara answers, no. You know what? Islay hoshana achviti. He has another hoshana. He has other lulav and esrog. He doesn't need this hadas for his lulav and esrog. He has a different one. And therefore, it's not really fixing the vessel somehow. We said three interpretations. I said Rashi's interpretation is this is not called making, not really called fixing a vessel, because it's only fixing a vessel if you need it for the mitzvah. If you don't need it for the mitzvah, it's like picking grapes off of a cluster of grapes that are in your refrigerator. Did you make it into a vessel? No. If there was a mitzvah to use a cluster of grapes, to use a branch from a grapevine, to do a mitzvah with, and you need to pick off the berries, and you need that one, then you could say you did a mitzvah. You made it into a vessel. There's no mitzvah to use there's no problem picking grapes off of a cluster of grapes. Hey, you pick some berries off of hadas. What are you going to say? You fixed it for the mitzvah? No, that's not the one I'm using for the mitzvah. I'm using a different one for the mitzvah. So therefore, it's not called fixing a vessel. So this is very different than fixing a vessel when it comes to making and building and making a vessel. This is not so, because what you did was, I picked some berries off. I fixed the vessel. I didn't fix a vessel. I'm going to use this for my hadah. I'm not using this for my hadassim. So I'm not. This is not my hadas mitzvah. I have a different lulav and esrog that I keep in shul, and that one is the one I use. This one is just happens to be here. I'm eating. I'm using it to eat. In fact, there is a Tosfos, not in Sukkah, but he mentions that what happens later on if I actually need that lulav to use. It doesn't matter. When I picked it, I didn't need it. So when I picked it, I didn't need it. That's it. So the way Rashi learns is it's not considered a fixing of a vessel. And so what the Gemara is really doing is backtracking and in backing out of the previous assumption. Previously, we assumed that Rebbe Elazar is following his father's opinion, that davar she'eina maskaven is going to be mutter, that it's something that I didn't have intention for, and therefore it's allowed. And that means that this opinion is arguing on Rebbe Yehuda's opinion in Shabbos. And the Gemara's conclusion, according to Rashi, is that no, it's not really that he's following his father's opinion, because he could follow even the other opinion. And the reason it's permissible is because you didn't fix a vessel, because once this is not being used for that purpose, it's not called a vessel. It's not being used for hadas. So therefore, it's not called a vessel. It's called a cluster of grapes, a cluster of myrtle. It's a branch of myrtle. It's not a mitzvah myrtle. I'm not fixing it for the mitzvah. That's not called fixing a vessel. This is not intended for a vessel. It's not planning on being used for a vessel. It's my fruit. I'm eating these berries. So therefore, according to Rashi, the Gemara is retracting. The problem with Rashi, of course, it's not a problem, but the question is, why didn't the Gemara say the word Ella? Ella is normally when the Gemara retracts from the previous assumption and changes it to a new assumption. So so Taisvis learns differently. Taisvis learns, and I mentioned yesterday that he answers the question rather than retracts the whole assumption. He answers that final question. And I wasn't really going to get into it, but I decided maybe I'll just share with you the way Tosfos learns, because it's a very important law of Shabbos. It's good to know. And so I'll just share with you what Tosfos says. This Tosfos over here in Moide Reb Shimon, Psikresha. That basically the way Tosfos is understanding this is that the Gemara had asked that this is inevitable. When you pick berries, you're automatically going to make this a kosher hadas. It's going to be usable. And according to Reb Shimon, that's prohibited because it's called a psik resha. It's automatic. It's going to happen. When you pick your berries, you want to eat the berries, but you're automatically making it into a good hadas. So therefore, you fix the vessel. Similar to fixing a vessel, you fix the hadas. However, the Gemara says, but you also have other hadassim. Because you also have other hadassim, so you can't really say that your intention, even though it's automatically going to happen, but we can't say that your intention is for the benefit of what the malacha of fixing a vessel is meant for. Meaning, normally when you fix a vessel, your fixing of the vessel is to use that vessel, right? That's your goal, that you're going to be able to use it. Because you don't plan on using this vessel, so therefore, it's going to be permissible in this scenario. Why is it permissible? It's davar she'eino miskabin, and it's psik resha. It is something that you didn't have in mind, but it is psik resha that it happens automatically. But there's also another element here, and that is that because you don't need it, it also falls into the category of a davar of a malacha she'eino tzarech legufa. It also falls into the category of something that you don't need its intent, that you don't need what it's meant for. For example, if you dig a hole, not to dig a hole in plow and so on, or to build, what did you dig the hole for? You dug the hole in order to get earth. You needed to get some earth. So you dug a hole for not the intent. In other words, the intent of the prohibition of Shabbos. What is the normal case of digging a hole of Shabbos, where we learn from the Mishkan? They would dig a hole to plant, and to grow, to plow. They would dig a hole in order to plant the dyes that they would use for the materials for the Mishkan and so on, and so the plant the ketores, whatever they would plant for, they would be plowing and planting, and that's why they would dig holes. That was the intent of planting, not to get earth. And if you go and do it to get earth, that's called a melacha she'eino tzricha legufa. It's called a malacha that you don't need for its own, that you don't need for itself. You're doing the malacha, you're doing the act for an ulterior, for a different purpose. And because of that, Tosfos says that's what the Gemara is really saying, that you have another hadas. So you can't say that I'm fixing this hadas for the purpose of using it as a vessel. I'm not fixing it for the purpose of using a vessel. Yes, it's automatic and it's going to get fixed. But because I have a different one, this would be called a malacha she'eino tzricha legufa. It would be called a malacha that I don't need it for itself because I'm using a different one. So once you have that idea that there's another one, and even though it's called I did the malacha, but it's a malacha she'eino tzricha legufa. I did the malacha, but I don't need. But this is not what I'm going to be using. So because of that, it should be putter. It should be exempt from bringing a sacrifice. However, that doesn't answer the problem here. Tosfos still has an issue, because even though it's putter, it's still usser. You're still not allowed to do that on Shabbos or Yom Tov, because malacha she'eino tzricha legufa is something that's prohibited to do, even though if you did it, you will be exempt. But it's still prohibited. It's still not allowed, even according to Reb Shimon. The answer to that problem is that because it's a mitzvah, you would be allowed to do it. Now, this is a topic of debate among the commentaries, what that means. It's a mitzvah. The hadas, you don't need. You have your other hadas. So what are you telling me? I'm allowed to pick the berries in order to eat because it's a malacha she'eina tzricha legufa. It's a work that I don't need it for its own purpose because I'm fixing it, but I don't need it for the fixing. I need it because I'm eating. That's what I'm using this hadas for, and I'm really using my other hadas. So, but it's a mitzvah, and therefore I'm allowed to pick the berries. I'm allowed to pick the berries because it's a mitzvah. I know it's a malacha she'eina tzricha legufa. I'm doing something wrong. I'm fixing a hadas. But why am I fixing a hadas? I'm really just eating berries. I don't have intention to fix that. No, but it's automatic. I'm fixing a hadas. So I'm fixing a hadas. This is the problem. However, it's a malacha she'eina tzricha legufa. It's a malacha. It's a work that I don't need for its own purpose, meaning I'm doing the work, but that's not what I'm getting from it. I'm eating a berry. That's what I'm getting from it. I'm not getting the purpose of fixing it. So it's called a malacha she'eina tzricha legufa. It's a work that I'm not benefiting from. I'm not gaining from the work. I'm not doing it for that purpose. I'm doing it. I'm doing it to get the earth. I'm not doing it to dig. I'm doing it to get the earth. I'm doing it to eat the berry. Why? How can I say that? Because I have another hadas in shul or somewhere else that I could use to shake. But the thing is, that's prohibited. The answer is no. It's a mitzvah, so it's on a rabbinic law. It'll be a case where the rabbis didn't prohibit it. In other words, really, it's a rabbinic law that I'm not allowed to do a malacha she'eina tzricha legufa. I'm not allowed to do a work that's not needed. That I'm not really, I'm not doing it for that purpose. The malacha is being done, but I'm not doing it for that purpose. I'm not doing it for the gain that the work normally does. Normally, that's prohibited, even according to Reb Shimon rabbinically. But in this scenario where it's a mitzvah, therefore the rabbis permitted me to eat the berries. And according to Rebbe Elazar, Reb Shimon, what does it say? You're a mematin b'yom tov. You could eat it at Yom Tov. What's the mitzvah? I have my other lulav and shul. What's the mitzvah of eating these berries here? I've got my lulav and shul. Or it's a mitzvah over here to eat to have these. To eat these, to use this hadas. What's the mitzvah over here? So this is one of the hard things with Tosfos. Tosfos doesn't tell us, but he says because it's a mitzvah, the rabbis didn't prohibit it. They allowed it.
I have a question.
Just 1 second. So how do we answer this? There's a mitzvah. So one of the commentaries wants to say that in case someone else needs it, the mitzvah, it's like a quasi mitzvah. It's a maybe. It's a mitzvah, maybe mitzvah. Maybe someone will use it, or it could be
it's suitable for the mitzvah. It's suitable now for the mitzvah.
But
if
the rabbis
you need it, if somebody else needs it,
right. But what we see here is the rabbis had in mind, even just in case, just in case you might need it, someone might need it. We want you to have an extra. We're not prohibiting you to do this. Somehow it's someone might need it. It's therefore it's going to be permissible. Yes. You know what, Jeffrey? I think David had his hand up longer. Let me just answer David first. David, yes.
Yeah, when you're making the hadas permissible by taking off the berry, by eating the berry, isn't that lacha of the patish, of the final blow?
Yeah, which is fixing the vessel. Yeah. The Gemara's answer is that the final blow or fixing a vessel, which is the term the Gemara is using here, is fixing the vessel is only if it's a malacha that you need, that in other words, a malacha that your purpose is to fix the vessel for that goal. If the goal is not to fix the vessel, you're banging for some other thing, like you're digging in order to get earth, but not to make a hole. So you're fixing the vessel here to eat the berry. That's what you're doing here. You're fixing the vessel, but it's really to eat. It's a malacha. You're doing the work, but it's for the different outcome. Your goal is a different outcome. It's not to fix not to fix the hadas. Therefore, according to Reb Shimon, it should be prohibited rabbinically only and not biblically. And therefore, because it's a mitzvah, the rabbis didn't prohibit it. And therefore, it would be permissible, according to Reb Elazar, Reb Shimon, to even pick the berries for eating purpose. That's the way Tosfos is learning this. Yes, Jeffrey.
So I was going to say that you made it so that somebody else could use it, but now I'm going to ask you: is this comparable when you can cook only on the first day of Yom Tov for the first day? The second day you have to cook only for the second day. So before they had the procedure of Erev Tafshilin, they said, take a big pot and you cook. And if there's left over, then it's okay to use it the next day. It seems like a very similar kind of concept. You should only be cooking now, and it's late in the afternoon, so the first day of Yom Tov is almost over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not really sure that it follows that same logic. This is a very, that seems much more logical and permissible than this type of case. Because in your case, you're really cooking for today. It happens to be that if there's left, there might be some left over, Here, it's automatically fixing this. You're definitely fixing something. The thing is that you're not really. It's malacha shein tzricha legufa. I don't see it so similar. Maybe if we learned the beya and we went into the logic.
Yeah, I'm sure that there are a lot of other things that we think about that we call it a shinui.
Mm-hmm.
That also seems very similar to this, but I couldn't right now think of an exact one. But we don't grind things on Yom Tov, even though you're allowed to cook. So you can't use a regular grinder,
right?
But we use an alternate, right?
Mm-hmm.
We bang it on the table or something.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so it seems to me that's more like in that category that you want to solve a problem, but you don't want to do it direct. Okay, and it's Shabbos or Yom Tov, and it would be helpful to be able to solve it, but you don't want to do it directly because then it would be a very.
In other words, you're claiming that shinoi, something indirect, is sort of connected to this idea of malacha shein tzricha legufa is like a shinoi. That's how you're like boiling everything down into one sort of like one rule, category. And it all boils down into this concept of shinoi. It's a very interesting, and it really deserves much more thought. That's a very big step to take. Very revolutionary to be able to to say such a thing. Listen, if you go through the laws of Shabbos, the tractate Shabbos in Beya, and you come up with that sounds like, then I would say it sounds good. Just to jump to it from this, I think it's a little big step to take, a big leap. Without going through all the Gemaras about these ideas and proving it from each Gemara, you know what I mean? It's quite it's definitely an interesting thought. I'm just saying, like, it's a little far fetched at this point from just seeing two lines about Hilchos Shabbos here.
Well, it seems to me a lot of detail was gone into here. It requires a lot of other thinking.
Yes.
For something that's very, very easy, something that's very, very simple, right? And so the force of it is that we are often in a situation where we need or would like to do something, and it might be a mitzvah. There's different kinds of mitzvahs, but there's poor people who need food too, and you want to give them the food, and the whole beginning of Shabbos starts with handing the food, and which way you do that to the poor man who's standing outside your window. And the whole discussion of Shabbos starts with this, which doesn't seem to be like, that's not the basic idea of Shabbos, right? But you want to solve a problem and you want to do something that's sort of a mitzvah. How do you get around the prohibitions?
Right. Well, I would just add one thing along what you're saying, and I think I got what your point is. Did you conclude? Is that more or less your point?
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, so I would just say one thing. One is the one thing that I would say is that in Torah, there's no such thing as a loophole that we figure out, there's a loophole and we're able to do it. The Hashem and the rabbis, the way Hashem wrote the Torah and the way the rabbis made their rules is that they intended all of these permits. It's not like the lawyers weren't smart enough to cover all cases, and therefore tax law, you find accountants coming up with different loopholes because the lawyer, whoever wrote the laws of the accountant that wrote the laws, weren't smart enough to cover all bases. So therefore, there are loopholes that you can get around it. Here, the Torah, Hashem knew everything, and He permitted certain. If you did it in a certain way, then it's all right. And the rabbis, the same thing. They knew that you could get around this way and that way. If they could write the whole Talmud, they could figure out all the loopholes. But the thing is that they permitted it in certain ways, certain scenarios. That's not, because that doesn't fit into the problem of the issue. In other words, so this is in part of Torah is called Libun Hilchasa. Libun Hilchasa means that it's all about finding the permits that the rabbis allowed, finding the permits that the Torah allowed, because the reason, according to at least Kabbalistic ideas, is that if you find something that's permissible, what you've done now is allowed it to become elevated. You're now allowed. Now you're going to be able to use that hadas for the mitzvah. Now you're going to be able to eat that because it's really kosher. Oh, I thought it was not kosher. No, but and it's this that the fact that it's actually permissible makes you is a positive thing. In other words, that's what Hashem wants us to do, is to try to find things that are permissible. Koyach dehetera adif, the concept of the ability to make something permissible is much better than prohibiting something. Anyone can say, oh, you're not allowed to do this and you're not allowed to do that. I don't want to think about it. So I'm just going to tell you that it's usher. I don't want to figure out if it's permissible. I'll just tell you that it's prohibited. That's why I don't have to use my head. But really, in Torah, it's the opposite. Something that's permissible. In fact, the word permissible in Torah, heter, means it's untied. That's what permissible is in Torah. Heter means it's untied, meaning it's not locked up by the koyach hatumah, by the powers of impurity. It's not locked up by them, and therefore it's able to surge to heaven. It's able to become holy. It's not locked up and tied up by these three impure by these three levels of impurity. Instead, it's able to be elevated. So that's the concept of a permit, of something that's permitted in Torah. Before I forget, I just wanted to mention that there is one other interpretation of Tosfos, that it's a mitzvah, and that Tosfos is talking of what Tosfos means. This is a little change in the way we understood it, but that is that really you don't have another lulav. What you're going to do is give someone else your lulav to eat the berries from it. So he has another lulav. So he's going to eat the berries in order for you to have a mitzvah in your lulav. So because he has another lulav, so he's doing the malacha in order to eat the berry. You're offering someone else to eat the berry. He's doing it to eat the berry. It's a malacha that he doesn't need. He doesn't need to do to kosher your lulav. And the reason it's permissible is because he's doing it, and ultimately it's a malacha, and for him it's a malacha shein tzricha legufa. He doesn't need that. He doesn't need the guf hamalacha because he has his own lulav, and that's why it's a mitzvah. In other words, it's a mitzvah because you need it. It's in order for you to do the mitzvah. So that would be a case where it's not just potential for mitzvah; it's actual mitzvah for you. And if for him, he's basically biting off the berry in order for you to be able to fulfill the mitzvah. The nice thing here is that the rabbis permitted it, that it's allowed. Okay, yes, Moshe.
Okay, I just want to backtrack just a little bit. If it's usher or it's there's a heter for this, because I've seen this happen in some synagogues where the kids eat, they'll eat candy and they tear it in order to eat the candy.
So as long as there's no letters, that's really the issue. If there's letters, it does get complicated. Sometimes they have writing all over the labels. It's a little problematic. But yeah, but there is a heter to give it to a guy to open, because if you give it to a guy to open, So the goy is not intending. It's called a. That's an interesting case connected to our Gemara, because our Gemara just said that a psik reisha is prohibited. The davar sheina maskavin, a psik reisha, you didn't intend to do it, but it happens automatically. That's going to be prohibited. In Shulchan Aruch brought down that only applies to a yid, the law of psik reisha. By a goy, there's no problem. So if a goy opens the candy for you, he's intending to open the candy. Now, automatically, he's going to rip some letters. He's automatically going to rip letters. That you don't have to worry if that is not a problem. You're normally not allowed to tell a non-Jew to do work for you, but you're telling him not to do work. You're telling him to open the candy. That's not work. Open the candy is not a problem. The problem is ripping letters when you're opening it. The ripping letters is something that's going to happen as a psik reisha. It's gonna happen automatically, but it's not his intent at all. So therefore, seemingly you would be allowed to have a goy open the candy because the goy doesn't have the laws of psik reisha. Okay, so that concludes a previous Gemara. Then there was one other brisa where it said huter iguda b'yom tov, where we'd be allowed to bind it together. And the Gemara explained that if the lulav came apart, however you tied it, it fell apart. So you would have to bind it together with a string, with not with a loop and not with a knot, but just use some type of string, tie it around, and then stuff it inside and be able to it should hold together. So the Gemara said, "Who does that go like? Why can't you make a loop at least? Make a bow tie?" The Gemara answered that there is opinion that holds a bow tie is prohibited. That's Rabbi Yehuda. So this brisa follows Rabbi Yehuda's view. You're not allowed to make a bow tie on Shabbos. So a bow tie that's gonna last. And the thing is with the lulav, how long is it gonna last? It's only a week, but you're gonna keep it there. You're not going to untie it at the end. You're going to just keep it there. So because it's not really considered temporary. It could last. It's going to last forever because that's the way it's going to be disposed of, is together with that loop. So anyway, so it's going to be prohibited according to Rabbi Yehuda. You wouldn't be allowed to even make a loop. And the Gemara says, oh, if it's Rabbi Yehuda, then you have a problem of what about the fact that you can't get away with just binding it together. With a string or something, you can't just tie it together without a knot. According to Rabbi Yehuda, you actually need a knot. So if he holds like Rabbi Yehuda, he needs a knot. The Gemara answers, no. He holds like Rabbi Yehuda that you're not allowed to make a bow tie on Shabbos. He doesn't hold to Rabbi Yehuda that you need to make a knot. You tie it together however you want. You put the lulav together, and it's interesting because in Shulchan Aruch talks about the tying the lulav and the hadassim and aravos, and we know the minhag is to just use a loop. We use a loop. We don't actually tie it together, even though there seems to be an inyan. Maybe you should tie it, like we see Rabbi Yehuda seems to hold it should be tied. But the vart is that as long as it stays solid, that's considered hidur mitzvah. Zekeli ve'anveyo. That's the beauty of the mitzvah. So if you use the way we use these rings around the lulav, those rings, as long as you make them, tight, that's considered beautifying the mitzvah. It's good enough. But Rabbi Yehuda held it needed to be a knot. Okay, and then we learned the Mishnah about the aravos, and we spoke about the Gemara already, where the aravos, does it have to grow on the stream, or is that a mitzvah, or is there no benefit of it growing on the stream? It's just called a hadassim that grow on the stream. Anyway, so that's a discussion in the commentaries with the Rashi and the Rosh. And then we have so we had different brises explaining what the word arve, why is it plural? Arve nachal. And we also had a brisa. The one opinion in the brisa was that arve nachal, what is it? Why does it say the word stream nachal? Because the leaf should be long and narrow, should be like a stream, long and narrow. That was one thing that another brisa said. Why is it plural? Arve, and that means not only than the stream one, but even other types of aravos, Baal and Harim. So it says a plural. It includes all different types. Again, that's where Rashi as his would argue with the Russia. Now then the Gemara says that then the next page 34a. So we have Abba Shol says Arve is plural because it's really saying that you need to have two aravas. There's the arava of the lulav and esrog, and then there's the arava in the Beis Hamikdash, which we'll talk about later in the Mishnah and Gemara about it. And so we'll see it later in about 10 pages. We're going to get to that if it's a Shem. And then the Gemara said, well, how do the rabbis know if it's they don't use the word arve, the plural, to learn about the Migdash, the Hashanais on the Beis Hamikdash, to learn about how do they know about it? The Gemara says that's a halacha l'Moshe Sinai, and we learned that there's Eser Netiyos, Arava, Nisuch Hamayim. These are all halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Okay, so now we come to the next Gemara. We're about 5 lines from the top of the page on 34a. The Gemara says, Tanu Rabbanan, 34a. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught in a brisa. Hagdelois arvei nachal. Hagdelois ala nachal. It says arvei nachal. And the Gemara says it means that they grow by the stream. Prat l'tzaptzefa hagdela beina. That excludes a tzaptzefa. What's a tzaptzefa? That's a different. We had that in the Mishnah. That the Mishnah had said that a tzaptzefa is psula. Niktam roisha nifra to aleha tzaptzefa psula. These are puzzle. These are invalid. Rashi said it was a min arava, the type of arava that its leaf is rounded.